Hi, everyone. Just a quick little update. First, thank you for joining us tonight. It's currently 6:30, so we're going to give it about 2, 3 more minutes just to let those last couple people trickle in, and then we're going to get started. We have two options tonight. We have closed captioning available as well as Spanish translation if needed. And so if you need either of those, the buttons should be at the top screen where it says closed captioning, as well, under more, where it says closed captioning and translation. But with that, I'm going to let the music play and we'll get started in about 2 more minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Nothing is what I need. Everything is already here for me.
All right, I think most people have trickled in, so we'll go ahead and kick this off. First, just so everyone knows, we do have closed captioning available as well as a Spanish translation channel in the similar drop-down menu. We are also recording this for those that couldn't be there so they can go back and rewatch and be kept up to date. So to start off, my name is Jonathan Barrett, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Caleb Education Task Force. One, kids I'm super passionate about, and my wife is also a third grade teacher, so education is close to home for me. I would like to say thank you all for attending our forum and spending the next hour or so discussing our schools, kids, and discipline. We are a part of Caleb, whose purpose is to bring together an institutional coalition of faith-based, labor, and other community organizations in order that their constitutes gain a powerful voice in public affairs and issues in the wider community. As Caleb's Education Task Force, we have a passion for the students of Hamilton County and are currently seeking ways to best serve them. During this past year, we have researched how discipline is handled in our schools, and through our research, we have decided that the best way to advocate for our students right now is by interrupting the school-to-prison pipeline. In this forum, we hope to communicate what we found, as well as receive feedback from you in the community on how to reform discipline in our Hamilton County schools. Throughout the forum, please feel free to ask questions, and we will do our best to answer them as we go. We will also have time at the end to answer questions and kind of have a more open discussion. I will drop the polling questions and the form in the chat, and then I will hand it over to Sandy to kick us off.
Good evening, and thank you so much. I know this is a busy time of year, so thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Sandy Norris Smith, and in 2012, I retired from the Hamilton County Department of Education. And at the time of my retirement, I was an exceptional ed lead teacher. A large focus of my 30-plus year career involved dealing with behavior and discipline issues and appropriate interventions for children, teachers, and parents, helping to develop those behavior plans. I'm also a member of a community organization, Unify Ed, which is a member of Caleb. Our group shares with Caleb the focus on social justice and seeks to have a positive influence within our community. I'm very glad to be a part of this education task force because I feel like my years of experience give me a certain perspective and insight into the issues that we're dealing with that continue to challenge our teachers, our administrators, and most importantly, our children and their families. I'm going to show you some slides that have to do with our local school system. And this is the things you're going to see are also issues in the national scene as well. So I want you to see that the problem we want to address exists in our system and also in much of the rest of the country. It is both local and national. And as Jonathan Barrett said earlier, it is sometimes known as the school to prison pipeline. So if we can have the first slide. Okay, as you can see in this first slide, this is data that was gathered in the 2017-2018 school year in our Hamilton schools. And this would include elementary up to grade 12. For every 100 white students, 4 were suspended. For every 100 Black students, 16 were suspended. So I think that you can see by looking at those figures that there is some difference in the likelihood of a Black student as opposed to a white student to be suspended. And this is taken from disaggregated data that is gathered every year. Another thing that happens with our students is the dropout rate for students suspended 3 or more times before their junior year in high school is 31%. That's huge. That means that approximately one third of our students, if they have been suspended 3 or more times before their junior year in high school, they're more likely to drop out and not complete their education. Here's another pretty startling statistic, which some of you may already know, but 52% of African American males who drop out of school are incarcerated by the time they are in their early 30s. You could be thinking, just kind of reflect on that for a minute about why that might be. So overall, a student who drops out of high school is more than 3 times as likely to be incarcerated at some point in his or her lifetime than a student who graduates with a high school diploma. One interesting thing too, we talked about students being suspended 3 or more times. And this goes all the way down, remember, to elementary school. I have even dealt with situations where a kindergarten student was suspended. A lot of these situations, you may be thinking, oh, these are for violent behavior, or bringing drugs and selling them, or bringing drugs and using them at school, or bringing a weapon to school. That actually is not the case. Most of these suspensions are for what we would consider more minor violations, being disruptive in the classroom or disrespectful to teachers, or other, could be, depending on the age, other students or administrators. We know that when a student is suspended, what happens? Their education is interrupted. And connection with the learning community is, of course, impacted. If they are suspended and out of school, they're not, one, in their classroom to be learning from their teacher, and they have no connection to other students. I'm going to just put a little personal note in here. I had 2 children, a daughter and a son. My daughter was an excellent student. My son enjoyed the social aspect of school. He was very, very bright, but he really he wasn't very successful in school. So these long-term suspensions have a long-term hurtful impact. The dropout rate, again, just to reiterate, is again 3 or more times likely to be impacted for students who've been suspended 3 or more times. So this is the problem that brings us here tonight. What we want to do, as you heard Jonathan Barrett say earlier, we feel the best way to go about changing some of these statistics is to interrupt what we refer to as the school to prison pipeline. And now you're going to hear more detail about this from Jonathan Brown.
Thank you, Sandy. As you guys just heard, again, my name is Jonathan Brown. I'm one of the co-chairs with Jonathan Barrett, so it makes it easy. Jonathan, or JB, however it's easier to remember. This is personal for me because I am currently a teacher in Hamilton County. I'm a first grade teacher in our school, so I see it, I experience it, I live it every day. Education is what I do. It's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about my scholars, and it translates over to everything I do. Henceforth, why I'm in the Education Reform Task Force. As Sandy talked about earlier, she presented the problem, and we're going to not only present the problem, but propose the solution and how you yourself can become involved in helping make this a actionable item to change. Before we get into that, I just wanted to give us the baseline on what the school to prison pipeline is, because we all come in at varying levels of knowledge. So I want to put us all on an even playing field. The school to prison pipeline is kind of an all-inclusive name that includes a lot of multiple steps that lead to one thing, which is ultimately jail for students. It starts at a legislative level. So it starts at the very top where there are mandates or laws that are put into place that then trickle down onto how the school system or how the school itself works on a day-to-day basis. So as you can see, it goes from legislation to that of the teachers. And so because of that, and it trickling down into the teachers, it then leads to students acting up because of these pressures placed in the classroom and the pressures to perform, students acting up, ultimately, as Sandy said before, then being suspended, as we have here. With that suspension, not only are they losing time from the classroom, they're losing time from that vital learning community that they are a part of. So the social interaction with the friends, the social interaction with the teachers, family interactions within the schools are being missed out on. And from those interactions, they are then creating a bigger learning gap. As the learning gap widens, as we see, it leads to more suspensions or more punishments within the school. And when you have those multiple suspensions built up, as Sandy stated before, it ultimately leads to dropout and then the end conclusion of which is jail. So summing it up and putting it all together is you have laws and jurisdictions put into place that then trickle into the school, which then trickle down to the students, causing disruptions in behaviors, which lead to suspensions. And as the suspensions grow and they lose that time from their learning community, the gap widens, ultimately leading to 3 or more suspensions and ultimately funneling into jail. What we as Caleb are looking to do is to combat that and to interrupt this whole system. And part of that starts with this key part here within the school and the learning community. And when I say learning community, as you'll hear referenced tonight, it's not just the classroom when they walk in Monday through Friday, it's the home life, it's those after school programs they go to, it's the teachers, the students, the community members that they interact with. That is a learning community. So just keep those 2 very key terms in mind as we go forward and explore a lot more of the data. Taking us a little bit deeper and restating a lot of the data that we had before, I'm just going to re-emphasize and restate it, but pull us out a little bit from locally to that of nationally to show how we compare Hamilton County to that of the entire nation. So nationally, if you look at African-American students, they are 2 to 3 times more likely to be suspended than that of their white counterparts. And so as we see, and I've stated before, if you have more than 3 suspensions, that leads to a 31% dropout rate. So if you have 3 or more suspensions, it's likely that you may drop out before you reach your junior year. Whereas if you have less than 3 suspensions, it's a 6% dropout rate. So naturally, we know the lower the dropout rate, the less chance of you drop. The lower the suspension rate, the less chance of you dropping out. But when you look at these more closely, the suspension rates also lead to high rates of involvement within the juvenile justice system. So breaking the data down and breaking it apart, 56% of African-American males have had prior suspensions. And then so from that, 52% of African-American dropouts are incarcerated, as young adults. So 52% of African-American males are incarcerated as young adults, thus as a result of these suspensions as we were talking about before and the dropout rate. But if you flip it and look at their white counterparts, again, just putting those 2 hand in hand, 10% of white dropout rates are incarcerated as young adults. So as we're seeing, there's this huge disparity. It's not just 52% and 50%. It goes from 10% of white dropouts are incarcerated as young adults to 52% of African-American male dropouts are incarcerated as adults. And that's a huge disparity that Caleb is looking to combat on a daily basis. So I said we're not just going to present the problems tonight, we're also going to present the solution that Caleb has come up with and that Caleb is going to be heading on in the upcoming years. That solution we have is called restorative practices. And so I can sit here and explain what restorative practices looks like on a day-to-day basis, but the best way is to hear from someone who lives it, who breathes it, who does this every day. In this video is a 4th grade teacher named Megan Wimpelberg, who is currently, again, teaching like me in Hamilton County school system. She's a teacher with me. We work in the same school, except she's in 4th, I'm in 1st. She had the opportunity to go through a restorative justice program training, and she implements these practices every day in her classroom. So I'm going to let the video play and let her talk about her experience and why this is such a beneficial program in our school.
Hello, my name is Megan Wimpelberg, and I am a 4th grade teacher at Orchard Knob Elementary. I was just introduced to restorative practices and restorative justice in July of 2019, and it has literally changed my life since, and I will be completing the master's program of restorative justice and restorative practices in June of next year. So I'm really excited for that. For those of you who don't know, restorative practices and restorative justice work hand in hand. Restorative practices are the things that you do before a conflict that helps build the relationships, foster that respect, and just create that culture and environment either in a room or just between a group of people. And then restorative justice are the responsive actions that happen because of a conflict. So whether that's a conference or a meeting or a sit down, that's what that is. So restorative practices tries to work with the 80-20 principle. You want to have an 80% proactivity and then a 20% reactivity or responsivity, I guess. And so in my classroom, I do that through, we have check-in and check-out circles every day. So we start our day every day comparing how we feel to something. So instead of just saying, hey, how are you feeling today? I will say, like, today was Taco Tuesday. So I asked my kids to tell me what taco topping they felt like and why. Just something random, but they'll say, I feel like the meat because I'm tired, or I feel like the shell because I'm rock solid and ready for today, or they'll make whatever kind of comparisons. What's funny is whenever they pick the same items, but it all means something different to them. So it's just a great way to get them creative in the morning, but also to go ahead and tell the whole class how they're feeling so that everyone has an understanding of where everyone is. I even had a student come up to me one day who was like, you know what, I came in really sad, but when we did that check-in, it made me really happy because I knew that everyone could tell that I was upset and they were all really helpful to me that day. And so it just puts them all in the same playing field to start with. Checkouts are the same thing. I ask them what their favorite thing was of the day and a goal for tomorrow and things like that. But either way, we start our day and end our day with a form of community building. And once you create a community sense or a positive climate and culture in a group of people, the conflicts are not as often, and they're also not as harsh or hard to get through. But obviously, there will be conflict. And so whenever we have those times, I always pull those kids afterwards, and we have what restorative practice is called just a small impromptu conversation where we go through the affective questions of like, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought since? What can we do to fix these wrongs? Not saying like, what did you do? And why did you, like, to where it's very accusatory, but asking like for them to tell their truth, because the biggest realization you can have whenever you're dealing with conflict is that everyone's truth is their truth. And that's why they argue so passionately about what they experienced or what they witnessed, is because that is what is true to them. And so even if they think that someone threw a pencil at them and it was actually just someone who accidentally tossed it, their truth was that someone threw it. So until you get them to share their truth and get the other person to share their truth, then there's not going to be any sort of mediation or any kind of compromise or agreement or any of that. So just, I mean, essentially in my classroom, I make sure that all conflicts are dealt with restoratively, for lack of a better term, instead of being punitive and immediately putting consequence on situations. I always let the kids have the chance to tell their truth, because that also builds respect between me and the student. So I've used restorative practices now for a year and a half, and it's just been amazing. I hear all the time of people saying that like the community in my classroom is different from in other classrooms, and it's not a plus to me. I don't take that as a ego booster. I take that as a story of that restorative practices works, and that any kid, despite their age, gender, race, their family's economic status, needs that relationship, and they need that opportunity to learn how to talk about what they're feeling, because we're also in a generation where people shove things down. And if we don't raise our kids to talk about how they feel and how they can work through those feelings, then they're just going to continue to be self-destructive as they continue to grow up. So, I mean, that's just really what restorative practices is to me. And please feel free, if you go to the iirp.edu website, there's more information there. There's also a graduate certificate and a master's program if you're ever interested in studying something like that. But yeah, I'm so grateful that I was asked to speak. Again, my name is Megan Wimpelberg, and I'm 4th grade teacher at Orchard Knob. My email is on our school website if you'd like to contact me. Thank you very much.
All right. So to kind of recap, I know the video, she did a great job. A couple highlighting points from there. As Megan said, restorative practices are the proactive actions and routines between the students and the teachers to build relationships. Those routines can be those morning check-ins, or at the end of the day, those checkouts, basically emotional and mental checks for the students. And over time, that creates a positive class environment, community in the school. We're looking for kind of everyone's kind of bought into the same page kind of deal, checking in with everyone. The restorative justice aspect, as Megan said, is the responsive actions and circles and check-ins that happen after a conflict comes up in the room, whether that's a class circle or a community circle, depending on who's involved. Basically, both sides are telling their truths, and there's more communication with it than just immediately being written up or dismissing it and being the end of it. There's kind of a full picture, holistic kind of working through it with the students, having them work through it with each other, kind of feel to it. Again, she is living it and working it. And now I will hand it over to Jared to explain what we are asking for. And all right.
All right, well, howdy everybody. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Jared Steinman. I'm a community organizer with Tennessee United. We organize in the migrant community in Chattanooga. We're a member organization of Caleb as well. That's how I ended up here on the Ed Task Force. And I specifically chose to be on this task force because I've spent a number of years working in schools and summer camps, including East Lake Academy in my neighborhood and some summer camps at a church in the West Side. So some of these disciplinary disparities become pretty obvious when you spend time in these classrooms and with these kids. And education is one of my passions outside of the other work we do in the community. So my part now is to talk about what exactly are we asking for? What are we wanting from you all today and tomorrow and moving forward? There's a lot of logistical work to get to implement schools. The counselor, the social worker head up the entire program in the district. We need lead counselors in each school, but there's a number of steps before we even get to those points in this process. And so what we're doing first is, of course, these forums. We're trying to get parent and community buy-in is perhaps the most important step, that we need to have parents as the main stakeholders in schools, and of course their children as well when they're on that level to be having these conversations. We need them to believe in restorative practices and see the impact that it's going to have and begin to ask for this in their classrooms. From there, we're talking to teachers. We want teacher buy-in and administration buy-in at individual schools. The goal being to get it implemented district-wide, but to have the district listen to us, we need the community behind us, we need the teachers behind us, and we need the administration of individual schools behind us. So the first thing that we're doing is these forums. get buy-in. That buy-in looks like continuing this pilot program for restorative practices that we've seen in Orchard Knob. This past year, they ran 2 grades doing restorative justice program in their classrooms and collecting data compared to the other grades that are not doing these programs, and allowing us to compare and prove with some local data the effectiveness of these practices. We want to continue that piloting program into the year 21 and 22, largely because the coronavirus disrupted some of our data collection that we were already implementing in Orchard Knob. We want beyond that to have some proof backing this up so that we can work on getting implemented into a full school or 2 or 3 by the year 2022 to 2023. Eventually expanding this enough that the whole district is behind it. We have funding to get all teachers in Hamilton County trained on these practices, with the end goal of replacing all expulsions and suspensions in elementary school with restorative practices, restorative justice to address points of conflict in the classroom, and as we discussed this whole evening, interrupting the school to prison pipeline. So to recap real quick, we're looking first for community buy-in so that we can move to teacher and administrative buy-in and get the school district as a whole behind implementing this as a pilot, first in a full school or 2 or 3, and eventually into the entire school system. Finally moving to completely eliminate suspensions and expulsions in elementary schools in favor of restorative practices. So I'm going to hand it off to Keely, who's going to tell you a little bit more about what you can do immediately tonight to start making a difference in this process.
Hey y'all, so my name is Keely Gilliland. I'm an independent caucus member with Caleb. And I don't have kids. I'm not planning on having kids, but I am a daughter of a teacher. I am a friend to a lot of teachers, and I have 2 nephews and 2 godbabies who are being educated in our public schools. And I also have a lot of neighborhood kids that I care about. So I share all of that to say that even though I don't have children and I'm not a teacher, I care about this work because I care about our community. At this point, you've heard from about 5 different people, and we all come to this work for different reasons. And I know that all of you have come tonight based on an interest or passion that you have that's different from every other person that's here tonight too. So what I'm going to do is spend a couple of minutes sharing some different ways that you can get involved and put that interest that brought you here tonight into action. So I'm going to take over the screen share and hope this works out. So as we move along, Jonathan and Jonathan are going to pop into the chat box a couple of links, including the link to our call to action sheet. And so there's going to be within that sheet some hyperlinks so that you can access all of these things that we talk about tonight. When you're looking at it tomorrow, because I know this is still going to be in your brain as you're going about your day tomorrow. So the first thing that we'd ask for you to do is to sign this letter of commitment. So this letter is going to go towards elected and appointed county officials to show that there are a broad number of community members throughout Hamilton County who care about the current discipline disparities in our county and want to see that change, and that they believe that restorative practices is a part of seeing that change. So start here. Then you can take a look at our restorative practices information sheet. This is a very broad overview of the things that we talked about tonight. We'd love for you to take it to your small in-person gatherings, not gatherings, Zoom meetings, and share it with your neighbors, share it with your community members, share it with your coworkers. And then after you've shared it, get them to sign the letter of commitment. The next thing that you can do is contact your school board representative. So they want to hear from community members about what's important to them as parents, as community members, as taxpayers. So contact your school board representative. In our call to action sheet, we'll have a hyperlink directly to the HCDE website. If you're not sure who your your school board representative is, you can look them up here. You can also drill down and view the schools that they represent. So if you're not quite sure which district you're in, you can find the school that's in your area and be able to contact your representative from there. In the call to action sheet that we'll share, we have written a couple of starting sort of conversational points. Your school board representatives want to hear why you're contacting them in your voice, but hopefully this will get the creative juices flowing for you a bit. Another really valuable way to get involved is to share your story. So we shared a lot of data tonight. It's very easy for that to become disassociated from real people and to forget that the discipline disparities in Hamilton County are actually affecting not only students, but it's affecting teachers. And so if you have a story of how you or a loved one has been affected by the way that discipline has been administered or not administered in our schools, whether that's a negative effect or a positive effect, we'd love to hear your story. Because as we all just witnessed, Megan telling us how this change in her discipline practices in her classroom affected her and affected her student, that's incredibly powerful. So if you have a story to share with us, Jonathan and Jonathan will again drop their information in the chat box so that you can reach out to them. Also, you can get involved with Caleb. So the Education Task Force meets once a month in addition to our regular general Caleb meetings. We'd love to have you join us. So you're seeing a small group of the Education Task Force tonight, but we need more folks, we need more passion, we need more people helping us to accomplish these goals. So we'd love for you to get involved with us. One final way is that you can sign up through here or by contacting any one of us to help us phone bank. So in the coming months and over the next year, we'll be spending some time reaching out to our community members by phone, letting them know about upcoming HCDE board meetings where discipline may be discussed. We might be asking them to get involved in a particular effort of the task force at the moment. And we may be doing some support raising for teacher trainings for restorative practices. So we'd love to have you get involved with that. So that was a lot. What I'm going to do is give us about 2 or 3 minutes, because again, we are about taking action here. And we know that you all came because you are interested and that you care. And so we're going to give you an opportunity to publicly give us a commitment of what you're going to do next. So we're going to wait about 2 or 3 minutes. I want you to kind of think through what are the things that that we just said that you could get involved with us, and what are you going to do in the next day or two? What are you going to do in the next week? So whatever that thing is that you say, yes, I can take that action, drop it in the chat box for us. And if you have any broader questions about what we've covered tonight, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat box as well. We'll have a couple of minutes for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to get us started on a timer and be thinking about the things that you can do. I'm going to actually pull up the call to action sheet so that you can take a look and remember all the ways that you can get involved. Sorry, I didn't have great music like Jonathan did at the beginning to get us through these 2 minutes. All right, I'm going to give everybody about another minute. So if you haven't already let us know what commitment you're making for an action that you're going to take over the next couple of days, now is your time. All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, you could scan the QR code, which will take you to that page as well. So also add the hyperlinks in there. And thank you to those who are putting their commitments in the chat box. It's really going to help us stay. It's really going to help us stay accountable for each other as a community to help make this a real thing in the future. As Keely stated earlier, one of the easiest things to do is just to sign our letter of commitment tonight. It takes about 3 seconds to sign, about 4 minutes to read, and the QR code will take you to all of that. But we do want to open it up to questions, and because I know this was a lot of information thrown out to you guys, so we do want to give space for you to open it up to questions. You can use the chat box. You can just come off mute and ask us. We're family here, so let's get these questions up there. Oh, Charlotte, I see your hand.
I just want to say wonderful presentation. I thank you all for your diligence and your hard work. It shows. I guess my curiosity is, since in the midst of COVID, how these numbers have been impacted for as suspensions. And reason why I ask that is because even though we are in the midst of COVID, we know that that still has not stopped from adults being arrested and incarcerated. So I'm just curious to see whether or not if the school to prison pipeline is still in full in effect, even in the midst of COVID, if you all know.
All right. So in terms of Hamilton County, we have to dive more specifically into that data and just look at it, being with the fact that data collecting was kind of halted last year with us going to completely virtual third quarter and then coming back this year and everything just kind of being all hands on deck. I can say from reading in other articles, the idea of suspension and expulsion, it's still alive and it's still shifted it's shifted from that of the classroom to that of homes as well. As you can read stories of students, not in our county, but students across the nation being cited for instances of they saw a toy Nerf gun in the background. So a teacher reported them and thus they have a mark on their record now and were suspended when they were virtually learning at home. So in terms of Hamilton County, I don't think, as to my knowledge, I'm not sure if those acts are as egregious as one of that, but I can say that the idea of suspension and expulsion is still alive, which is why we're working that much harder to combat it, because restorative practices, as you guys see, is proactive, and the way suspension and expulsion is more reactive. So we want to get ahead of the curve, hear those stories, because many times a situation can be halted with a conversation. So the need for us is that much deeper now that we've had 2 forms of learning going on. Any other questions?
Do we have a set number of letters that we would like to present? Do you have a goal?
For right now, we do not have a set number. But we would, in these upcoming months, start researching on what we would need, get in contact, have one-on-ones with school board members to figure out kind of what level of commitment they're looking for, and then go from there.
And I saw a question in the chat talking about, are we looking at statistics regarding suspension of students with disabilities like autism? Leave Donna, if you're on the call, I know this is more, statistics is more of her wheelhouse, but if she's unable to come off mute, I can speak to it as well.
I can. When we looked at the local statistics, we didn't report them in this forum, but in spite of all the laws and the regulations that are supposed to protect children with disabilities, they are suspended at a fairly high rate. I don't remember the percentage anymore, but it was roughly the same as I think it's African American children. Kind of surprising.
Thank you. And thank you, Natasha, for asking that question, because as she stated, her son is minority and autistic, and so suspended multiple times in kindergarten through second grade. And so that's part of what we're trying to come up with the statistic building, as Donna stated, is figuring out what numbers are we trying to catch, and this, they would be, of course, be included in those data to prove that this is a better practice than that of suspension. Thank you. Any other questions?
Question?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Donna. It's Sandy. I don't know how much things may have changed since I retired, but don't we still operate under the cumulative 10 days of suspension, and then services have to be provided for students with disabilities?
As far as I know, that should be the case. Yes.
I just wanted to be sure, but I think that's also something that it's real important for parents to be educated about. And Natasha, I see that you're saying he has an IEP.
It gets to be very complicated, particularly if you're talking about a child with autism, because the social skills, the lack of social skills, the lack of social ability is part of the disability. And so to punish a child for his disability, is not right. I know teachers get very frustrated sometimes when they don't have all the supports they need or all the education they need about a disability. But I would absolutely urge you to look for somebody within the school system, maybe a school psychologist or a counselor to help you be an advocate, because there are laws that protect children with disabilities.
One of the things that I say, and of course, remember, I've been retired since 2012, but as a lead teacher, I attended a lot of IEP meetings in a lot of different schools. And one thing that I will say that I think Hamilton County really has improved, excuse me, has improved on is informing parents of their rights and helping them to understand in the disciplinary IEP team meetings what's what.
Yeah, and also just to kind of highlight it and bring it back full circle too, with the idea of restorative practices, it's this idea, as Megan stated, hearing the story. And so it creates a more collaborative classroom in that students from all walks of life, as she said, abilities, race, religion, and groups, things like that are all included, just due to the fact that they learn how to interact with each other. So it moves past the idea of this person is my classmate, more of this person is part of my learning community. And in order for us to thrive, we have to work together. And so I think that's a huge benefit to having this involved in our school system, because it denotes the fact that something happens, we're going to suspend for it, and the idea that we're going to work as a community to figure out what we can better do to support the person who created the action, not penalize them. And yes, please, of course, we can redrop our emails in the chat, because I see something from Luis Bell and Natasha as well. And I do want to honor your comments, but please email us, because these, again, are points that we can make when presenting this to the school board, to central office, to people like that, to help make this a permanent structure within our schools. Because ultimately, as Caleb does, is we want to create power among the people, so then we can further support the people in our community, in this case, our scholars and our kids. And so we want to create this power among us all to help make this a permanent thing, because we don't want it to be a one and done. We want it to be, as long as the school system is here, we're going to make this happen. And yes, community stories like y'all are so important and so vital to helping us create this narrative and show why it's important, so they can't say it isn't. Caleb, to get background info on 2017-2018 school year, for all schools in Hamilton County, out of 5,768 students recognized with disabilities, the expulsion rate was 0.3%. The in-school suspension rate is 7.5%, and out of school was 11.7%. To help shed a little bit more light onto that, and then to answer Sandy and Donna's question, there is that limitation on suspensions for a student with an IEP, so no more than 10 days. Are there any other questions or comments? And again, please email us these stories, because we honor this, and we thank you for sharing and being open to sharing with us in this space. But we need people like you with that passion to be a part of Caleb. I can throw it to Jonathan Barrett for any last words, but thank you guys again for showing up and being present with us tonight.
Yeah, just to echo, thank you guys again for coming out and taking time. I know it's been a long year, and this is a busy time of year as well. Thank you again. The link that I just dropped is one for the questions, and you can also share your stories there. Again, our emails are also available. I'm not an educator, but I do pest control, so I do have a little bit of freedom around my email. But thank you guys again, and if there are no other questions, we will set you guys free with the rest of your night.